Greetings and welcome back to LA Quill. Today we're diving into Chapter 11 of Arianna's tale. Get up. The voice was angry and impatient. It warned of dire consequences if it was not immediately obeyed. Arianna heard the harshness in his voice and came slowly awake, her mind fighting full awareness every step of the way. She did not wake up well at the best of times. Remembering her state of undress, she made sure she was properly covered from her neck to her toes. She wasn't going to let him see anything if she could help it. Dammock was standing over her, fully dressed and ready. He tossed her some clothing he had pulled from her travel bags. "Get dressed," he said sharply. He turned away so she would hurry. They had a lot of ground to cover today. This day would be more difficult than the previous two, and he didn't want to waste any time arguing with his new slave. They had to move. Now. Arianna dressed quickly, not willing to anger him just yet. She was hungry, having missed out on food the previous evening, but she didn't get the chance to eat. Dammock dragged her rather roughly from the tent, and his men began disassembling it. The silken tent would need to be packed away before they could leave for the day, since Dammock wasn't willing to lose the expensive tent simply because they were crossing the ice shelf. The men were done momentarily. It shocked her how quickly they could move when they were motivated, and they were obviously motivated today. The wagon and all the horses were ready to go in moments. Fires were banked just as quickly. It was still dark, which explained why she felt as if she hadn't received enough sleep. Well, that and the fact that she had tried to run last night, which had cut into her slumber. "Why are we leaving so early?" she asked, stifling a yawn and trying to keep up with the prince. With his long legs, he easily outdistanced her, and she stumbled after him. Her voice sounded vaguely petulant when she spoke. That happened when she was tired, afraid, or nervous. And right now, she was all three. He didn't even look at her, but he did slow his pace to allow her to walk beside him without falling. "We need to reach the ice shelf by daybreak, so we have no time to waste." He'd noticed that her voice was higher pitched than normal and knew that she was upset, tired, and uncooperative. He gave a purely mental sigh, not really looking forward to this day, and for more than one reason. "Why? What's the ice shelf?" That sounded peevish, even to her own ears, and she winced. She didn't much like herself when she was exhausted. Hopefully, she could get a full night's rest this evening when they stopped. His face broke briefly into a half-smile. "You'll see." He refused to say anything more about it. At least he doesn't seem angry this morning, Arianna thought. His anger truly frightened her. She'd have been even more afraid if she wasn't carrying his child, for surely he would have killed her by now, likely in a fit of anger. Still, she figured it would be best if she didn't antagonize him right this moment. She sensed somehow that he would be even less tolerant than he had been. Arianna decided to remain silent and allowed him to lead her to his horse. They stopped beside the huge stallion, and Arianna noticed several cloaks across the saddle. There was a distinct chill in the air, despite the temperate climate of the forest, since it was still too early for the sun to warm the earth. She'd be glad of the warmth the cloaks could afford her, provided she was allowed to use one. The thought that he might decide not to allow her to have one as punishment for last night had her biting her lips with worry. She didn't think she could stand to be so cold for much longer. It would be unbearable. To her relief, Dammock took one cloak and wrapped it tightly around her. He did the same for himself. Removing the rest of the cloaks for a moment, he lifted her into the saddle, having her sit side-saddle fashion as he had the previous 2 days. He didn't give her the option, since she was a slave and he was her master. "Hold these," he said, laying the cloaks in her lap. He quickly mounted behind her. Looking around, she saw that the other men were doing the same, each having multiple cloaks resting in front of them as they rode. It was curious, but Arianna decided not to comment. She was hoping the mystery would resolve itself before she felt compelled to ask. Just as the sun began to shine down on them, they arrived at the ice shelf. Arianna had never seen such a thing. It was a smooth pass through the mountains, as if the gods themselves had scooped out the area with a giant spoon. No more than a dozen men would be able to walk side by side. The sides of the pass were sloped and perfectly smooth, almost as if they'd been sanded down. There was a horrible wind coming from each side of the pass, flowing down into the center. Where these winds met, Whirlwinds danced along the base of the pass. The sight was enough to make Arianna wonder at the sanity of these Imperials. The winds howled like a pack of banshees let loose on the world. From where they sat on their horses outside the pass, Arianna could feel the strength of those winds. The air was so cold that her very breath was stolen from her. She started to shiver and moved just a little closer to the man mounted behind her, deciding it was better to be warm than stubborn. She didn't want to get too close, however. She certainly didn't want this man thinking she might like him or that she would accept his treatment of her. But he was warm, she was cold. She'd be foolish not to take advantage of the heat emanating from him. Damok looked down at her for the first time that morning. I will erect a barrier to protect us, but even that is not totally effective. He pulled some cloth from his saddlebag, and she saw the others were doing the same. The prince tied this cloth across her mouth and nose, taking care to tuck it tightly around her face. Do not take this off. It will help warm the air so you can breathe a little easier. And keep your cloak pulled close around you. He tied his own cloth over his face. He wrapped them both in an additional cloak, leaving two on the saddle in front of them. When he had completed his task, he spoke. When we reach the halfway point, you may have your third cloak, not before. Why not? She asked, confused. Her voice was a little muffled by the cloth, just as his had been, making her voice sound hollow. She wanted to be as warm as possible right now, and the third cloak would help her with that. She saw no reason why she couldn't have it now. You will stay warm longer if you wait. That's all you need to know. He pulled her closer so that she rested fully against him, ignoring her efforts to stay separate from him. After a moment, she gave in completely, even going so far as to tuck her feet between his leg and the horse for warmth. She could be stubborn later, perhaps when she wasn't so cold. What about the villagers? They won't have cloaks, she reminded him. They were her friends, and she was worried that they would freeze to death in this place. He didn't look at her. One of the mages will generate a heat pocket. Not much heat, but enough to keep the slaves alive. He wasn't concerned. They'd transported slaves through the ice shelf before. She bristled at his reference to her friends as slaves, but said nothing for fear of angering him again. She wasn't certain he'd let her keep the cloaks if she upset him right now, and it was just too cold for her to survive without the warmth the cloaks afforded her. So she remained silent, but she wasn't happy about it. One of the men was moving through the group, securing pieces of cloth to the horses, over their mouths and nostrils, just as with the humans. The horses had been trained for this and so suffered it without a single complaint. Arianna was amazed. If anyone had done that with one of the village horses, there would have been mayhem. These truly were exceptional mounts. The troops gathered close, forming a circle around their prince, who was the only mage amongst them. Damok started to glow a soft blue as he drew power for the spell he was about to cast. The glow could only be seen from the corner of an eye, but it was there nonetheless. It was not a simple spell and would require most of his energy, and any additional energy that he could find. There was plenty of energy present in the mountains, so he took it. He reached out with hands of his own energy, creating a conduit between himself and the surrounding power flowing through the rocks and ice. He shaped this power to his own will, forcing it into a form that would most benefit him. Damok created a reflective shield to block out the wind and extended it around his party, making sure everyone was safely inside. It glowed a faint blue to everyone, mage or not. All would be able to see where the shield, formed like a large bubble, ended. He couldn't do anything about the cold, not alone, but the wind was the real enemy. The wind could steal the breath and freeze a grown man in his tracks. As soon as he was ready, the shield firmly in place, he moved forward, and his men moved with him. They were counting on him for their lives, and they were not likely to stray beyond the confines of the shield. If they did, they weren't nearly as well trained as they should have been, and would die here. He couldn't spare a thought to worry about them right now. As they moved into the pass, the shield kept the winds from them, glowing as it did so. He heard Arianna gasp and remembered that she'd never seen real magic before, not counting what little he had worked in her cottage, living her entire life in the small hamlet. He wondered what she would think of his home, which was maintained almost entirely by magic. She would certainly be shocked. Dismissing the thought, he concentrated on the task at hand, knowing it would be a challenge and relishing it. 3 candle marks later, Damok placed the third cloak around Arianna's shivering body. She was tucked into him and her skin was like ice. He knew they needed to increase their pace. His shield was strong, but it was eventually going to fall. The slight girl would be the first to suffer the consequences when it did. He could not allow that to happen to the mother of his unborn child. He had held this type of shield for this long only twice before. The first time he had been alone, and so the shield was smaller and easier to maintain. The second time he had come with an army, but he had had 40 other mages to assist him. More mages meant a more effective shield. His shield was still functioning, but it was obviously weakening. He was on his last legs, his own personal energies almost exhausted. Damok knew that he was on the verge of collapse. He increased their speed, more than doubling it, and he knew they would all pay for it later. Paying for it later is better than dying now, he reminded himself. He pushed his men and their mounts to their very limit. There was no other choice. Less than 2 candle marks later, they emerged from the pass, all alive, though rather worse for wear. Everyone pulled the cloths from their faces and gasped for warm air as the border guard came up to them, swords drawn and ready for battle. The guards recognized the imperial crest of the falcon in flight as well as Prince Damok immediately, and so lowered their weapons and hurried to aid their comrades. These border guards were well accustomed to dealing with those men who came through the ice shelf. Damok pulled the cloth from Arianna's face and touched her icy skin. She wasn't moving, but she was alive and breathing. She was shaking violently, and he knew he needed to get her warm, quickly. He couldn't do that here, not effectively. He needed to get to his own outpost of Dupree, and sooner rather than later. If he didn't, the girl would die, and their baby along with her. He dismounted, bringing her with him. He was completely exhausted, but it didn't show. The prince was an expert at hiding fatigue, and would never let his men see him falter. To the men, he seemed as fresh as he had this morning. He waited for one of the guards to approach him, truly too exhausted to make the effort of even a few unnecessary steps. Spyro stood beside him, head hanging, as exhausted as any of the men, and not able to hide it as his master did. "Sire," the man said briskly, saluting. They had been warned to expect the prince, and so he showed no surprise at meeting the heir to the throne in this place. "I need a fresh horse, now." He needed to get Arianna to Dupree as soon as possible, and his war horse needed a rest. He wasn't about to kill Spyro just to get to Dupree, no matter what the motivation. The stallion had served him far too well for that. Besides, it would take him years to train another Spyro's equal. It wasn't worth the risk, not when these men had fresh horses in abundance. The guard was appalled. No one rode immediately after emerging from the ice shelf. Everyone needed some time to recover from the shock and trauma of that dismal place. "But sire, shouldn't you rest first?" "Now, Lieutenant." His tone brooked no argument. He was tired and not in a good mood. The guard swallowed. "Yes, sire." He was hesitant, but obeyed anyway. He just didn't want to be the one to explain why the prince got himself killed instead of resting as he obviously should. He'd let his captain answer the question if it came to that. That's what captains were for, at least in his estimation. Within moments, a new horse was brought for the prince. He mounted smoothly, Arianna still in his arms. "Stay and rest, then join me at Dupree," he ordered his men. They were too tired to argue with him. Not that these men would have, even if they had been fresh. That's why Myron had chosen these particular men. They were entirely obedient, which was to his benefit now. They would do exactly as they were told, no questions, no hesitation. It was the mark of their respect for their prince. He could therefore ignore them. Doing just that, he set off at a gallop toward Dupree. And that's our tale from L.A. Quill today. If you enjoyed this chapter, let me know your favorite moment in the comments. Until next time, may your stories always be magical.